rescue efforts at a West Virginia coal mine put on hold because of dangerous gases. Is hydrofracking dangerous to drinking water supplies? EPA scientists define the scope of an upcoming study. And the head of Massey Energy discusses his company's progress on carbon capture research after receiving more than $100 million in federal grant money.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
Good afternoon, I'm Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for the Energy Report. Rescue crews on the scene of West Virginia's coal mining disaster have suffered a setback in efforts to save any workers that still may be alive. Air quality in the mine exceeded safe ranges, and as a result, rescue teams had to be temporarily pulled back. J. Christopher Atkins, Chief Operating Officer at Massey Energy, says he hopes to have crews back underground this evening. Rescuers got within 1,000 feet of a special chamber where 4 missing men could have taken refuge, but they had to evacuate after running into a dangerous mix of gases. Officials have slim hope the miners may have made it to the chamber where there is food and water. Monday's explosion killed 25 other miners. Massey Energy has come under fire this week for hundreds of safety violations it accumulated at the Upper Big Branch mine. We talked to Kathy Snyder, correspondent with Mine Safety and Health News, who worked for MSHA for 26 years, how unusual it is for an operator of large mines to have this many violations. She emphasized not the number of overall violations, but rather what are called unwarrantable failure violations.
Upper Big Branch definitely seems to stand out with 50 unwarrantable failure violations in 2009. It's not unusual to see 1 or 2 or 4 or even 6 at a large mine, but 50 is unusual in my experience.
You can see the full interview with Kathy Snyder here on the site and more on the coal mine tragedy and the dangers workers in all energy sectors encounter on Clean Skies Sunday, 9:30 a.m. on WJLA in the D.C. metro area or thereafter here on the site. The EPA begins a new study on hydraulic fracturing this fall, and a subcommittee to its Science Advisory Board said the study should not take a look at the full life cycle of hydraulic fracturing. The Science Advisory Board wrapped up its second day of talks on the issue here in Washington today. The subcommittee says it will recommend to the board that EPA study only the top risks associated with fracking because looking at the full life cycle would take too long and cost too much. In its 2010 appropriations bill, Congress ordered EPA to conduct a study on hydrofracking. The EPA's board subcommittee of 13 scientists and engineers said it would submit a list of recommendations on the scope of EPA's full study by mid-May. The full board will assess the recommendations in mid-June and create its own report for EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson before the agency starts its hydrofracking study this fall. The agency expects to complete its study by December of 2012. Congress allocated $1.9 billion in its fiscal 2010 budget for the initial work. The president's asked for $2.5 million in his fiscal 2011 budget. EPA says it needs at least $4.4 million over the next 2 years to finish its work. While the tripartisan push for legislation should result in the Senate climate bill the week after next, a bipartisan effort is now underway as well on a more narrow clean energy topic. Today in Washington, Massey Energy President David Crane outlined the latest analysis from the Electrification Coalition, companies involved in the entire value chain of the electric transportation sector. Crane says that Senators Alexander, Dorgan, and Merkley are following many of the principles of the electrification roadmap the coalition issued last fall, an effort to transition the U.S. to handle millions of EVs. Crane talked with Clean Skies' Tyler Suiters about another major policy push for NRG, federal funding for carbon capture research, and the roughly $135 million the company received from DOE last month.
It's a post-combustion carbon capture project that we would attach to our Parish plant down outside Houston, and we're very excited about it because carbon capture and sequestration, as I used to say, you can't solve global warming just by making coal clean, but it's hard to make the math work without making coal clean. So it's an important step.
Tyler also asked David Crane about the upcoming Senate climate bill, what NRG wants to see in the coal title, and whether the company is preparing for regulation of carbon emissions, as well as legislation. You can find that whole interview right here on the site, as well as coverage of the electrification roadmap rollout coming in November. It's all here at cleanskies.com. Connecticut could become the first state in the country to roll back its renewable portfolio standard. Legislation that has passed through committee would cut by nearly half the state's goal of of getting 20% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2020. 31 states now have renewable portfolio standards, with California and Colorado leading the way, upping their renewable energy goals to 30%. Backers of the rollback say that to meet current levels, renewable energy is mainly purchased from outside the state because the climate and availability of land for solar and wind installations makes that state unsuited for large renewable projects. And it is liftoff for Cryosat-2. The European Space Agency climate satellite successfully launched into orbit this morning from Russia's Cosmodrome. That's good news for scientists here on Earth studying the effects of global warming on the Earth's ice packs. ESA lost its first cryosat in 2005 when the launcher rocket failed. Just last year, NASA's Orbiting Carbon Observatory crashed into the ocean near Antarctica just after launch. Using radar, Cryosat will measure changes in Arctic and Antarctic ice, which cover about 10% of the Earth's surface. A judge has granted more time for Congress to approve a $3.4 billion settlement against the government for swindling Indian tribes out of royalties for oil, gas, and grazing leases. U.S. District Judge James Robertson says the delay is the last he will approve. It's the third delay since the lawsuit settlement was announced in December. The proposed settlement calls for the Interior Department to distribute $1.4 billion to more than 300,000 Indian tribe members. It would also have to spend $2 billion to buy back and consolidate tribal land broken up in previous generations. If Congress does not confirm the settlement by mid-May, Robertson says he will order Interior Secretary Salazar to appear before him to explain why. Here's a look at what's going on around the Beltway and Energy tomorrow, 10 a.m. Brookings Institution will host a Dr. Fox Penner for a discussion of his book, Smart Power, Climate Change, Smart Grid, and the Future of Electric Utilities. That's the Energy Report. We'll see you again tomorrow with your latest energy news. If you have any suggestions or comments about our programming on Clean Skies News, you can email us at contact@cleanskies.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. From all of us here in the Energy News Center, good night.